This week's Inside the Huddle is sponsored by Rabel's Auto Service as it Auto Be. They provide quality parts and service every time. They're located at 1610 Salina Road in St. Mary's, or you can call them at 419-394-1624 for your auto service needs.
Hey readers and followers, we're in week 11 of the Inside the Huddle preview. I am Jake Dowling from the Evening Leader. As always, I'm with Seth Kinker from the Minster Community Post. And we have a big one this week, a rematch of week 2 matchup between Marion Local and New Bremen. Two MAC teams, actually two of the best MAC teams aside from Coldwater in this matchup, so it should be really, really good. What we'll do this week, obviously, will be a little bit shorter. We'll talk a little bit about Marion Local's match last week against Riverside. Toss it over to Seth to talk about Marion Local. Bring it back over here to talk about New Bremen and their win last week against Fort Loramie. And then we'll talk about New Bremen and a little bit more about that matchup on Friday at Maria Stein. So, Marion Local last week, they beat Riverside 48-8. Division 7 Region 28 semifinal. The top seeded team, they're 9-0 and top ranked team in all of Division 7. Last week against Riverside, they had 20 first downs compared to the Pirates 2. First down, they had 442 total yards, 300 on the ground compared to Riverside's 25 total yards altogether. The only score for the Pirates was a 99-yard fumble recovery return for a touchdown in that second half. Other than that, it was pretty much smooth sailing for Marion Local. In their week 2 matchup against New Bremen, they won that game 21-13, scoring all 21 of their points in the second half after New Bremen took an early lead in the first quarter. And they scored on big plays, including an 87-yard touchdown pass. So for New Bremen, it will be trying to piece together all 4 quarters and to limit the big plays by the Flyers. Some of the stats from that week 2 matchup: first downs, Marion Local had 17 compared to 8 from New Bremen. Total yards, 398 yards for the Flyers compared to 178 for New Bremen, really stopping their running game. And then they had 5 lost fumbles, 6 turnovers in that game for Marion Local did, but New Bremen obviously wasn't able to capitalize. That was another storyline from that week 2 matchup. So how does things look on Marion Local's side for that rematch this week?
So looking up at that Marion Local rematch, I mean, talking to both coaches this week, the biggest thing was just kind of the growth of both programs and how far they've come. I mean, that week 2 in this pandemic-shortened season, talking to Chris Schmidt at New Bremen's practice the other day, he said that was technically our 3rd game. We only had one scrimmage game. We had a week 1 game, and then we were right there on week 2. So it was kind of both teams still trying to figure out what worked, what didn't work, who was going to play where, and then so he said now both teams are kind of more sure of their identities and where they want to get the ball to and what works and what doesn't. So now it's I don't want to say it's a completely different matchup because I talked to head coach Tim Goodwin and he said both teams are still relatively the same. They're just similar to Coach Schmidt. They're just more confident in what they do. So now it's just I think more about execution. You look at those big pass plays you kind of touched on in that run game. I mean, holding them to 27 yards the first time, that's both teams are similar in the fact that they both love to run the ball, and New Bremen can't be successful if they can't run the ball first. That kind of opens everything up for them, allows Mitchell to kind of have that option to now run and pass. We know he's a dual threat quarterback. I mean, the biggest thing, and you kind of touched on it as well, was those pass plays that kind of broke it open in the 3rd quarter there. Peyton Oddie had that 87-yarder. Charles Huelsman had another big pass to get him down into the red zone again, and then Peyton had another short touchdown catch. So it's about that growth in the secondary, and I talked to Coach Chris Schmidt about that, and he said, like we mentioned, it was earlier in the season, and now he said those guys are a lot more seasoned. He mentioned Dave Homan, that was only his 2nd varsity start. Now he's got really quality experience. You got Nick Allig, a guy who had varsity experience last year and is coming to his own more this year as well. That's just an opportunistic defense. They have 9 turnovers, I believe 14 fumble recoveries. So they're a team that finds the ball. They're good at finding the ball. So that one there is going to be a big key. And I just feel like that the matchup will be different in the sense that both teams it's going to come down to execution run-wise. If you look at for Marion Local on their side, the thing that stands out to me is how they've continue to get better in their rush game. Earlier in the season, their offense kind of struggled to get started in the first halves and then got it going in the second, with their defense kind of giving them time. Now, as we've gone on, it's been crazy to see kind of their offense has now kind of started to come into its own. And in the past few weeks, they've started to kind of roll out a wildcat formation with quarterback Peyton Oddie. He's playing wide receiver as well because they've thrown Carson in back, their starting quarterback, right back in there as well to kind of mix it up and give a kind of opposing defense is a nightmare, and it's kind of pick your poison. Coach Goodwin said, a lot of people, some people say if you have two quarterbacks, you have none. He said, I think that's bullcrap. If I have those two guys, those athletes, I'm going to play them. It's kind of just a matter of getting your best athletes the ball in their hands. Peyton's got great speed. You had his brother, Kyle Oddie, who's a freshman. He came into the mix late in the season. I think played the last 2 regular season games, Coach Goodwin said, and now he's kind of been featured in every single game since then. He's got 5 touchdowns. He's averaging like 7.5 yards a carry. So it's a guy there that you add that to their already stable running backs. You got Grant Meyer, you got Drew Seitz, Dylan Fleck. So that's now 4 running backs, including now a quarterback wide receiver hybrid who's also running the ball regularly as well. So it's going to be about kind of controlling that run game, and it's I think that's the big key there for the Cardinals. The Cardinals offensively wise, going up against New Bremen, their pass game has to get better. They have to do better than they did before too, to kind of balance that out once they establish that run. And one of the things Coach Goodwin said was they have improved on that. Mitchell Hayes is a 1,000-yard passer this season, so he's shown that, and he said, Coach Goodwin said, I think it's just a matter of them starting to pass the ball more. They're getting more confident in that. Zach Berkey, who's their leading rusher, is their second leading wide receiver out of the backfield. Dan Homan, who was their leading wide receiver last year, continues to be that big play threat for them. So he said, we're going to have to Coach Goodwin said we're going to have to watch New Bremen's kind of passing attack just to see where they go.
So for New Bremen, they had beat Fort Loramie, the number 2 seed in the region last week, and the number 3 state-ranked team, 16-8. And in that game, New Bremen had a pretty big lead, 16-0 lead, and then obviously Fort Loramie with that touchdown and then that crazy 2-point conversion made it really a game. But New Bremen really shut them down defensively. So a little recap here for New Bremen. Since their loss against Coldwater September 18th, that was their last loss, they've won 5 straight. They've outscored teams 170-42. So the defense has really stepped up. And they've won 6 of their last 7 since their Week 2 loss to Marion Local. Against Fort Loramie, like I said, they were up 16-0, but the defense limited Fort Loramie to 213 total yards and just 8 yards on the ground. That was really huge to not really get Fort Loramie an opportunity to really not only just move the ball, but keep the defense honest as well. There only one drive after they scored that touchdown. There was only one drive where Fort Loramie scored or ran more or got more than 35 total yards in a drive, and that was their last drive of the game, last possession of the game, where that ball was batted down on 4th down. That pretty much won it for New Bremen. So, like I said, defense really stepped up in that game for the Cardinals. Since their Week 2 matchup, they were up 6-0 against Marion Local. Obviously, they lost that game 21-13. They were up 13-7 with 4:06 left in the third quarter, but then just couldn't muster any offense after that, and couldn't capitalize on those turnovers. They had forced 3 turnovers in the fourth quarter against Marion Local, but just couldn't come away with anything. You had hit into the running game. They had only gotten 27 rushing yards on 35 carries for a team that averaged 157 rushing yards in the regular season. So that was a huge factor. Kyle Takeman was their leading rusher. You said Zach Berkey, was the team's leading rusher. Takeman was the leading rusher in that game with just 14 yards on 2 carries. So the game, and they still had an opportunity despite the fact that they forced 3 turnovers and they weren't really able to move the ball. They weren't running the ball. They still had an opportunity to win the game, but Mitchell Hayes was intercepted in the red zone there, against Marion Local to pretty much end it. So what do things look like for New Bremen on their side for this week?
For this week, I think it's going to be, when you look at the matchup coming in this time around, I think it will be interesting to see how much more evolved that passing game that New Bremen has, because they knew early in the season that they could kind of lean on their bread and butter. They brought back a lot of their skill position players, and they had and some of their guys on the line, so they knew having Wyatt Dickey back and Zach Berkey, they knew they could be strong in the run game, and they were heavily at the beginning of the season. But now, since that Week 2 matchup coming into now, I think it's going to be very important to see how effective that pass game can be. We know know in the secondary for Marion Local, you have Peyton Adi and Charles Huelsman. They're top 2 wide receivers who do play both ways. But in the secondary, that gives them 2 kind of lockdown guys in the back there. New Bremen's going to have to be successful in that pass game in order to kind of open things up for the run game. Usually it's kind of the inverse there, but we know that how stout this Marion Local defense is and how they kind of hang their hat on their defense, much like New Bremen does. So for me, it's kind of the reverse there for the New Bremen offense this time, is they need to really kind of figure out how they can kind of pass against this team and kind of open things up for their run game. If you kind of look at it defensively for them, it's got to be figuring out that run game that has kind of just it's a dangerous run game that has got even more lethal as the season has gone on. I asked Coach Tim Goodwin, like, you've had a ton of great teams, obviously. Where does this kind of rank as your most lethality-wise on the run game? And he said he agreed with that, because I asked him, I said, I'm new down here, but to me, I haven't seen a team be that good on the run and still continuing to improve once you got to the end of the regular season in the playoffs. And he said, we've had some great running backs here that have done stuff individually-wise, but he said, overall, from a standpoint, this is probably his best team, just in the rushing-wise, in the way that they can attack you. They've got guys who can go inside, in between the tackles. They've got guys who can bounce it out and use their speed, and they don't have just 1 or 2. They have 4, and plus another guy taking the snap too. So I think that those are going to be the keys for New Bremen there, kind of addressing things offensively and defensively for Marion Local.
Yeah, and you had hit a couple of times about the progression of the passing game for New Bremen. We were there last week against Fort Loramie, and there were so many wide open plays. Holman was open on many plays, but just couldn't connect. Yeah. The game was 16-8. It was pretty much a 1-possession game. It felt like a 1-possession game in some ways, but in some ways it didn't. Had Mitchell Hayes, quarterback Mitchell Hayes, connected on those long passes, I mean, it could have easily been a blowout by halftime.
Yeah.
So,
absolutely.
If they can really get that passing game going, that could make a major difference.
Yeah.
So what's other than that? Is there any other ways that New Bremen can really come out with a win in this week too? Is it possible? Is it hard for a team to beat another team twice? We always hear that all the time.
Right.
Is there any other way or anything else that you see that New Bremen needs to do to get a win at Maria Stein this week?
I mean, if they can, like we talked about turnovers a little bit already, New Bremen being opportunistic, having those 23 on the season. I mean, if they are able to force those turnovers, I mean, Marion Local has gotten better about a couple things over the course of their season, scoring in the first halves of the game, which is their offense struggled with at the beginning of the season, and turnovers were a problem for them. 2 things that they've kind of cleaned up through the season. But at the same time, New Bremen's defense has gotten better at forcing those turnovers too, and they had that crazy amount that they forced in the first matchup. So if they can force those again and recover maybe just 1 or 2 more of those, and then be able to capitalize on those, like it's just that much. It'll be allowed to be that much easier. It's that much more momentum swing, especially in high school football. It's big. So I think that'll be the other key besides those offensive and defensive points that we already talked about. If they can force those turnovers and just capitalize on 1 or 2 of them, I think that could give them a chance.
So that game will be on Friday, 7 p.m., Friday at Maria Stein. The winner obviously would go to the state semifinal, which will be a neutral site. Yep. Throughout the regional tournament, the top seeded team gets to host. Marion Local being the top seeded team, they will get to host in Maria Stein. So that's how that works for football. The other program note is Minster still has a game, regular season game. They will play at Covington, is that right?
Yep.
On Friday, and so far so good. It's their last scheduled regular season game.
Right.
But they still have an opportunity if they want to add 1 more. Yeah. Teams can add 1 more regular season game up until November 14th, and then obviously their season is over. So we'll have that for you. If New Bremen loses next week, we'll still have Inside the Huddle preview just to kind of recap seasons, recap Minster's season, that kind of stuff. Yep. So we'll definitely be back regardless of what happens next week. Obviously, be sure to follow us on social media, The Evening Leader, Facebook and Twitter, Minster Community Post on Facebook and Twitter. And obviously, we have our weekly preview this week for New Bremen and Marion Local, and the Evening Leader print edition on Thursday's print edition. Obviously, the Minster Community Post with their weekly coverage as well. And New Bremen Volleyball is also playing at the regional semifinal Thursday. If they win, could be a matchup with Fort Loramie and New Bremen. Last year's state final matchup would be on Saturday, 2 p.m. at Northmont High School. So a lot of crazy, interesting matchups. And girls soccer, give them a shout out. They beat Lake Catholic last night 3-2 in overtime. They will play Mansfield Madison Comprehensive. That's a mouthful. The top seeded, not quite the top seeded team, but they are the top ranked team in Division II girls soccer. Noon Saturday at Rough Rider Field. So make sure that you follow along with us Rider Nation Station will have that game televised, and be sure to root on the Riders. And we'll see you next week in Week 12 of Inside the Huddle. Take care.
Yeah. Next week, you guys are going against Marion Local, a team you guys have faced once already this year. What do you guys have to do better this time around to come away with the win?
We just have to stop the big plays. That's really our big. Like, if we make them drive, they're not going to score.
Yep.
I don't think they'll score on us on like just driving down the field. But if we stop the big plays, we can win.
All right, that does it for me, man. Thanks. Best of luck rest of the way. Yeah. Last one here for you. You're facing Marion Local again next week, a team you're very familiar with. What do you guys have to do better this time around to come away with the dub?
You could see tonight, I was one-dimensional as a quarterback. They just could take away the run because I couldn't put the ball through the air. Not obviously, if you look at the numbers, not a great night for me. So we got to be able to be two-dimensional next week and put the ball through the air as well as stick to our running, and hopefully we can make big plays against Marion.
Hey, this kid needs some props here as far as the Division VII Player of the Year, okay? He needs some of that, all right? Because you can tell me about stats with a lot of kids. Come see them put stats in our league, all right? This kid's a great ball player.
Thanks, man. Best of luck next week.